Well, it's clear to me from a military strategy point of view that the trigger event for World War III will be the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The major stress that I emphasize to people is to have a place to get out of the way that's safe from nuclear fallout and from pillaging and social unrest.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for July 28th through August 4th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1 ounce gold UK Britannia at just $59 over spot per ounce. 1/10 ounce gold US Eagles are just $47.99 over melt per coin. 1 ounce silver South African Krugerrand are just $2.79 over spot per ounce. And 10th ounce platinum UK Britannia are just $34 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have a widely followed expert guest. Joel Skousen is the editor of the World Affairs Brief. He's also the author of books on strategic relocation and defensive architecture. He's here for this returning visit on Liberty and Finance, which we're recording on Saturday, August 2nd, 2025. Joel, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Well, it's always good to be with you, Dunnigan, and to share your point of view.
You've visited us several times in the past to enlighten our viewers on your thoughts of rankings of different areas that they might consider for relocation. What are criteria that you use when evaluating the best areas for strategic relocation? You've also talked to us about defensive architecture as a primary and frankly a very foundational, literally, on the Maslow's hierarchy of preparedness steps to make for potential adverse situations. And right now, you also in your World Affairs Brief, you often advise your subscribers on your view on the risk posture, the geopolitical environment that we find ourselves in right now. A very concerning development came out in the past couple of weeks. There's been a lot of talk and changing almost by the day, talk about tariffs and sanctions and different aspects from either the Trump administration and other countries of the world. Most notably in this case, Russia has been informed by Trump, as we understand, that this 50-day limit until he was going to Trump was going to take actions is being shortened to 10 to 12 days. That was a couple of days ago. And the response from a Russian government official was that any severe actions on the part of the U.S. would be a potential danger for Trump's own country, as he put it, or your own country, and that knowing that Russia has typically had a fleet of nuclear submarines stationed around the world at any point in time, for Trump to have just announced yesterday that he's going to be positioning at least a few U.S. nuclear-powered subs into appropriate locations, given the situation we're in, all sounds not conducive to peaceful outcomes, but we wanted to get your perspective on this. So if we could talk about a few things. One is the current sort of nuclear brinksmanship we seem to be seeing, whether you believe it's all just posturing in the art of the deal, or if you think that perhaps there's more going on that we should be sincerely concerned about at this time. Secondly, recapping your key topics for us on both strategic relocation criteria and defensive architecture that people may be wanting to consider at this time if they haven't taken actions already. So if you could first bring us up to date on your latest thinking of the current geopolitical risk situation and how you see it.
Well, thank you, Dunnigan. It is a very important subject. Let me first of all start out by saying that it's always been my opinion that nuclear war with Russia and China is inevitable, 100% possibility. It's going to happen someday. So it's not a matter of if, but when. But as I pointed out in the World Affairs Brief, this is not the issue and is not the time for a couple of reasons. And you have to have a military background to understand the nature of nuclear war and nuclear retaliation. that either promotes the launch of nuclear weapons or inhibits the launch of nuclear weapons. And, this latest round of saber rattling between Medvedev, former president of Russia, ally of Putin, as I pointed out in this week's World Affairs Brief, that when Putin was term limited, he would switch places with Medvedev back and forth. They would take 2 years and he would take 2 years. So this is a real partner with Vladimir Putin, and he made what is now the 13th nuclear threat against the United States. This is not a new thing. Russia has threatened nuclear weapons use on any escalation of the U.S. in terms of the types of weapons that they send to Ukraine, or allowing the Ukrainians to launch missiles into Russia itself. And they have never followed through on those threats, not even close. There's not even been any warnings of missiles being prepared for launch from our spies in Russia and satellites, etc. So what's going on? The reason is Russia is completely tied up with its conventional army in the war in Ukraine. And it's shown great weaknesses in terms of that army, in terms of its ability to project power. And especially major weaknesses in terms of its ability to do a combined arms attack. Now, combined arms is a very important principle in military doctrine. It means that you can coordinate in the air, airstrikes, missile strikes, electronic countermeasures, armor on the ground, infantry on the ground, cruise missiles going forth. You have to be able to coordinate all of that, and the Russians can't do that. They've never been able to do it. That's why their invasion of Ukraine failed miserably. They weren't able to coordinate. It was either armor alone or infantry alone or missiles alone. And when you do that alone, you simply don't have the force and power. And so Russia's conventional army has been burning about 1 million troops so far. They're able to conscript a few more, but the bottom line is, relative to nuclear war, that Putin cannot use nukes to destroy the West if you can't occupy. Now, that's a core piece of nuclear doctrine. If you can't occupy a nation after you nuke their military, then they simply rebuild and come back after you. Now, that is not even considering the retaliation aspect. Now, if you do a preemptive nuclear strike on U.S. missile bases, which are all fixed bases, and so they're highly vulnerable. But it still takes, in order to have a kill on those, it takes maybe 2 to 3 warheads per base, and there's some 400 missile silos that are active in the United States, and so that's 1,200 warheads right there. And of course, you got to take out all of the U.S. military bases in a first strike as well. And as I pointed out in my World Affairs Brief, the Russians and Chinese don't intend to hit U.S. cities in a first strike. They basically want to retain the West's ability to manufacture and to support the technology that both Russia and China have relied on up until this point. And so they're only going to strike military targets in a first strike and then try to blackmail the West into submission. Now, if that doesn't work, you've got to occupy. Well, Russia can't occupy, so Russia can't use nukes. And so this is the 13th time that Russia has threatened the use of nukes, and Donald Trump is calling their bluff by saying that I'm moving 2 boomer submarines, or these are Trident-based nuclear submarines, missile submarines, SL ICBMs, into position to be able to strike Russia. Now, that's a bluff. Why is it a bluff? Because the U.S. always has Trident submarines within striking distance of both Russia and China. They're always permanently on station. And when they are replaced, they're replaced by another submarine before they leave that station. The range of the Trident missile, fully loaded with warheads, is about 4,000 to 6,000 miles. They can hit it from anywhere in the Atlantic in Russia or the Pacific. And so, in the first place, Dunnigan, the important point is that if this were a real war scenario, Trump would not be announcing anything. And the second place, as I pointed out, the missile subs are already in position. They've always been in position. They always will be in position as long as you have existential nuclear-armed enemies like Russia and China. So this is nuclear brinkmanship. This is calling their bluff. This is saber rattling in order to make it a public announcement that we aren't going to, and Trump is a very egotistical person. He isn't going to be challenged or talked down about something. And it's a problem because he doesn't always make rational decisions when you're reacting in terms of protecting your own ego or what you've said. But I do not believe that we are that closer to nuclear war because of the fundamentals haven't changed, that Russia alone can't use nukes against the West without severe retaliation. Now, the other aspect is that Russia will wait for China to join with it, and that's why they've always been aligned. The media pundits that talk about our involvement in Ukraine is driving Russia into the arms of China. That's a bunch of baloney. They've always been allied. Remember, Russia armed China during the Chinese war of the Civil War against Chiang Kai-shek. Russia gave China the nuclear technology to build nuclear weapons. Russia gave China the technology to build their missiles. Russia initially gave them a lot of the technology to build their warships and their aircraft. Now they stopped transferring technology because Russia fears China now as a stronger military power. So they're no longer transferring technology, and China has gotten to the point of stealing technology from the West. And the Commerce Department, even clear back to the Reagan administration, has been shoveling technology to China. This is part of the globalist initiative to build to build future enemies. They want a World War III. They want a World War III that will decapitate our military so they can drive us into a militarized global government. That's why the globalists have been covering for Russian and Chinese intentions for so many years, especially during the Cold War. That's why the globalists allowed Russia to take over and China to take over Vietnam, Cuba, Nicaragua, and many other states, Cambodia, and Laos. This was very important for people to understand. So let me just summarize. This is not a nuclear threat. This is saber rattling. It's just posturing in order to appear to your people that I'm being a tough guy against the West or against Russia.
In the face of this situation, whether it's different or not than the things that you said have happened multiple times in the past, does it underscore your ongoing advice that, as far as how you evaluate strategic relocation areas that people are considering within the U.S. and defensive architecture strategies that they would use to make sure that they have a defensible home, given that you say you foresee an inevitable case that would result in nuclear conflict?
Of course, the basic rule of defense in a nuclear scenario is you've got to remain 10 miles away from any known nuclear target. So I discount cities. The first strike will be against military targets alone. So you don't want to be within a 10-mile radius of any major nuclear base, especially one that has the ability to project power. And that includes refueling aircraft, B-52 bombers, the missile bases. It also includes places like that are fighter aircraft because they can project power with refueling aircraft and get clear to Europe with our F-35s. But then you want to hit, if you're the Russians, you want to hit your major maintenance bases like Hill Air Force Base in Utah, which is a major maintenance base for F-35s, as well as housing F-35s. And then there are secret underground facilities, all the secret bunkers that the government has, whether it's, in Maryland or in Western Virginia or Cheyenne Mountain or many of the other secret bases, like in the Utah West Desert that the government has. Those will be hit as well. But and some of those military bases, a lot of those military bases are in major population areas. In my book, Strategic Relocation, I do have maps on every state of the Union, color maps, which show where all the nuclear targets are. So you want to be at least 10 miles away. That's the blast circle of damage It doesn't mean that everything gets destroyed within 10 miles, but at least, in that range, windows get blown out of houses, etc., even though you may not die. The larger problem, of course, after one of those strikes, especially strikes that are with a ground-penetrating nuclear weapon, is that you have a tremendous amount of fallout. Now, an airburst doesn't have a lot of fallout, but you want to be aware of where the primary wind is coming from in your area. Here in North America, generally in front of the low pressure area that comes in from the west, the winds are from the southwest. And then when that front passes, the winds switch to the northwest and then back to the west. Only after the low passes do you get winds from the north coming, the wraparound winds from the north. So you have to be aware of those things to find out where the fallout is going to fallout to. But you can't make preparations for fallout, after the weapon's full. It's just too late. Unless you happen to have, in a high-rise building where there's a lot of concrete above of you, and then you don't have any preparedness facilities and food and water, which will be cut off. So it's difficult to survive long-term in the cities. But in terms of your residents, the major stress that I emphasize to people is to have a place to get out of the way that's safe from nuclear fallout and from pillaging and social unrest. The military doctrine of both Russia and China includes an EMP strike, or a nuclear EMP strike, where they take down the grid. Now, I've recently changed my opinion on that, Dunnigan, of whether or not they're going to use the EMP strike before a preemptive nuclear strike on military targets or afterwards. And the reason they might choose to do it afterwards is that because the reason they're hitting military targets is they want to maintain the infrastructure. They don't want to appear like the ogre of the world and killing millions of people, so they want to blackmail the West into submission. If the West resists that blackmail, then they'll threaten to hit our cities. And they might begin that with an EMP strike, which takes down the grid. And if the grid goes down through an EMP strike, it'll probably be down for at least a year, because we do not stockpile any of the long-distance transformers. They're all made in Germany or Korea or China, and we don't have very many of those stockpiled. So you can't get the grid back up and running once it fries those great big transformers that take the thousands of volts in the long-distance wires down to the 240 or 120 volts that are usable for people. And so that's the major structure. If you have an EMP strike and we have famine starting within the United States within a week or two, you're going to have a tremendous amount of social unrest. And so that's why I always recommend in my books, either The Secure Home or Strategic Relocation, that you have a safe room that has a sufficient concrete ceiling over the head to protect against fallout. But it's also concealed and in basement space, if possible, so that you can simply get out of the way if there's social unrest. If people are pillaging house to house, you've got to be able to get out of the way unless you want to confront them with weapons. And I don't think you want to do that just because they're starving people. And you would be overwhelmed even if you had, a few hundred rounds of ammunition. It's just not advisable when you have another option of getting out of the way. So but generally in terms of strategic relocation, my major criteria is to stay away from high-density population centers. And, in New York area, in that whole New York, New Jersey corridor, you got 1,000 people per square mile. And without electricity, when they start to pillage, and they're going to hit the suburbs first, and when the suburbs are empty, they're going to go out into the rural areas, and that can extend up to a couple hundred miles when you have that many people searching for food. And so it is wise to establish a retreat, or if you can, work remotely, to stay out of the major industrial corridors where people, when they start to pillage out of famine and fear, at least you can have some hope for, evading that.
You mentioned in passing your two books that I had brought up earlier. Can you give us the titles of those again? We'll put links to them in the description of this video for people who want to check that out.
Thank you. My preparedness books are on my website, www.joelskousen.com. And my World Affairs Brief, my weekly briefing on world affairs, is on worldaffairsbrief.com. That the three books primarily that people are interested in terms of preparedness are: number one, Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places. And it covers Central America and Canada as well. And the second one is The Secure Home. It's 700 pages, everything literally about preparedness, from safe rooms to solar and generation and generators and strategy for preparedness and for avoiding social unrest, etc. And the other book is the High Security Shelter book. Now, this is probably the most these are architectural plans on how to do a high security shelter in an existing basement. This is by far the cheapest way for most people who have an existing basement to get a shelter, and do it without a permit, do it in private by using the architectural plans to build a block shelter. And the concrete ceiling is out of concrete blocks as well. All of that is explained in detail how to do it, and it's in its new 6th edition. Once again, available at joelskousen.com.
Well, Joel, we're always grateful for your visits with us. Is it fair for me to ask a different question? Since you said you think that the current geopolitical saber rattling adds up to just about that much, what you will expect to see that will be different about a time when you say, this is seriously concerning to me because it differs in these ways?
Well, it's clear to me from a military strategy point of view that the trigger event for World War III will be the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And the reason for that is that the U.S. is planning on interdicting that invasion, and North Korea has vowed that they're going to attack the U.S. in South Korea, Guam, and Hawaii if we try to stop China. Now, that's a recipe for World War III, because, you see, China will not dare attack Taiwan until it's ready to take on the entire West, knowing that it is, especially under the Trump administration, that the administration plans on defending Taiwan. So that will be a trigger event, because North Korea and China have a mutual defense pact, and if we have to attack North Korea if they attack us, because we've got 26,000 troops in South Korea. And if we do attack North Korea, that brings China into a direct confrontation, as well as the naval battle going on in the Straits of Taiwan. But I think that's going to be the trigger event where both China and Russia will gang up and throw a massive nuclear strike against U.S. and NATO military bases and try to blackmail the West into submission. And I think our own globalists welcome that, because that's the perfect excuse to come out of their bunkers and tell the American people, we've got to join in a military global government now that our military has been mostly destroyed. And what Americans are going to say nay to that? I mean, that makes Pearl Harbor look like a picnic. That makes 9/11 look like a picnic. And both of those were provoked attacks in order to get us into a war. And that's what I'm predicting. And so it's going to be serious. But I think the trigger event is China's attack on Taiwan. And our U.S. intelligence says China thinks they'll be ready by 2027. That's only a couple of years away. Now, it could be later if China isn't ready. I'm not predicting it exactly at 2027, but I'm saying the window opens wide about that time and stays open probably through 2032. So sometime in that time frame, we're going to have nuclear war with Russia and China. And I'll tell you, it's going to change the whole world. I don't think we're going to recover completely.
Sober times, and good to be thinking about preparedness as we have been with your help since 2013. Joel Skousen, author of Strategic Relocation, The Secure Home, and The High Security Shelter. Thank you for joining us again on Liberty and Finance.
My pleasure, Dunnigan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for July 28th through August 4th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1 ounce gold UK Britannia at just $59 over spot per ounce. 1/10 ounce gold US Eagles are just $47.99 over melt per coin. 1 ounce silver South African Krugerrand are just $2.79 over spot per ounce. and 10th ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $34 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.